Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to a new video. So, we recently had a poll among Democrats and Democratic leaning independents by CNN, which asked who they think the leader of the Democratic Party is. It technically wasn't that. Best reflects the core values of the Democratic Party, but the point was who embodies the Democratic spirit the best and who should lead the party. And we saw actually AOC emerge with 10%, which, if you want to see how great she would do as leader of the Democratic Party, yesterday's video would be a great video for you, which reasons you should subscribe because we'll be maybe working our way down this list to see which candidates would be useful in a general election for Democrats and which candidates would completely flounder. But the main point of making this video is that AOC wins with 10%. This is such a divided, just insane list where almost everyone it has like 2% of people saying that they're the leader. There's really no consensus whatsoever. I figured that I would do a tier list where I could knock out quite a few of these people all at once. Now, the tier list is provided by Long Island Democrat on Twitter. I would recommend you go follow him. He's at LI Democrat, and I will probably include the link to this in the description. Otherwise, you can still see the link here, tiermaker.com/create/2028 democratic primary candidates 177397768. Without further ado, let's get into it. So, I'm gonna delete this tab because I feel like I know most people. But as a benchmark, here are the tiers mapped out in an election. We have two categories that aren't tiers. Impossible to lose. I really don't think any Democratic candidate could lose these states unless they're like legitimately Jeffrey Epstein or something. And out of reach, I don't really see any Democratic candidate winning these states. I just think that they're too far out of reach. F and greater should be, unless they're completely atrocious as a candidate, they should be able to win these states, even if they're an F tier. D is the candidates in D tier and above should probably be able to win these states. C tier, they should probably be able to win these states. And by the way, it applies. So like C tier, they should win the D tier states. D tier, they should win the F tier states. Plus, impossible to lose. B should be able to win these states. We're getting into the swing states. With B, A should be able to win Pennsylvania and North Carolina. And S, a truly great candidate, should be able to sweep all seven swing states, as hard as that may seem right now. I actually don't think I've had Nevada and Arizona going to a single Democrat in my predictions, but there's a lot of Democrats who I haven't done election predictions of on this tier list. So we start off with AOC. I think she's instantaneously an F tier. I do have her winning Colorado, Illinois, New York, and Rhode Island in my prediction, but she is losing every other state when she is the nominee. She's just that atrocious of a nominee. And if she weren't the representative from New York, she would lose New York as well. She is the perfect way to have suburbanites vote like it's 1984 and have the white working class continue to defect from Democrats. And Vance is a pretty good nominee, by the way. I'm assuming that Vance is the nominee against all these people. Vance is a pretty good nominee to exploit AOC's flaws as a candidate. So I do think that she would end up in F tier. And Andy Bashir, even though he is a pretty terrible candidate, I could definitely see him losing some of these states. Like the C tier states would be pretty hard for him, especially after the JD Vance rape gaffe, where he basically called for JD Vance's family to be raped. I think it'd be very hard for him to win, and a lot of his electability is gone. But he's definitely not as bad as some of the candidates. So even though he's a D tier candidate, I still do think he should get most of the Democratic Party on his side. Like AOC would completely collapse the Democratic Party, but Bashir would at least keep some of it on his side. Cory Booker, I feel like Booker would be an okay candidate. I still don't think he wins any of the swing states just because he's probably not that likable, but he wouldn't do terrible in a general election. I could see him giving Vance a run for his money to some extent. So I do think that Cory Booker would end up as a C tier candidate. Pete Buttigieg, I just don't think he has too much appeal. I definitely don't see him winning any of the seven swing states, and I think he'd start to bleed some of these more safely Democratic states to the point where I could see him being a D tier candidate. Chris Murphy, he's a relatively mediocre electorally speaking, senator from Connecticut, a bit of a backbencher who has been thrust into the spotlight a little bit over the Chuck Schumer controversies. So I could see him doing okay. I definitely think that he has some appeal to suburbanites, so I would actually put him as a B tier candidate. Now, these next three candidates, I do have to assume are jokes. We have Stephen Colbert. I don't know why he's a candidate, but I feel like he'd have enough appeal to keep the Democratic Party together. Relatively, wouldn't lose too much with suburbanites. So I'm debating whether to put him in C or D tier, but I'd say C. Um, C tier also isn't you're guaranteed to hold these, but like you should be favored to hold each of them. I still think he would probably um do worse than Kamala Harris's performance in 226, whether it's him losing New Jersey or New Hampshire or Nebraska second. But I don't think he'd do too much worse. This is Mark Cuban. I th- I think he'd be worse. Um, he certainly isn't that appealing to like the working class, and obviously Kamala Harris wasn't, but at least she, you know, wasn't a massive billionaire. He probably isn't liked by the progressive base, so I feel like he'd be slightly worse at a D tier. Then we have Eminem, which is why I think that these three candidates are jokes. Um, I, I, I I mean, he'd do fine, but like he might do okay in the swing states. Um, I don't even think I can put him at B tier. Like he's not. He's a better way for Democrats to do an outsider. Play a working class hero. Than someone like Jon Stewart, but I still don't think he would win a presidential election. He could potentially pick off one of the seven swing states, but past that, I don't know about that. And then John Fetterman, I would actually say, is a pretty good candidate. He would lose a bit with the progressive base, which is why I think he's between an A and a B. I would say A for now. I think he'd win his home state of Pennsylvania. He would actually give Vance a run for his money. Um, and you could make an argument that he would be favored against JD Vance. Without Nebraska, you know, uh, turning itself into winner take all because he would win Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And then who cares what happens in the rest of the states? That's already 270 for Democrats, assuming that they don't lose any of these more safely Democrat states. I feel like he'd appeal relatively well to suburbanites and moderates. Plus, he does have some rural appeal, especially since he has pivoted more to the right since 2022. And even in 2022, part of it was turnout, but he also definitely could appeal to rural areas better than the average establishmentarian Republican or even establishmentarian Democrat. I feel like he would be a pretty good challenger, but he's not like an S tier. He's not going to sweep every state. And then Ruben Gallego, I think he'd be fine. He definitely knows how to present himself as a pretty good candidate. Um, I don't think he would win. I think he'd fall short, but I could definitely see him being a B tier candidate. Picking off a few swing states. I think he actually would stop a lot of the Democratic bleeding in Arizona, but I don't think he'd end up winning it just because I do think Arizona is trending pretty Republican. Though, once again, he would give Vance a run for his money and potentially pose a threat to him, especially if the economy doesn't recover. Now, Kamala Harris is a pretty terrible candidate. If she runs again, she's just going to suffer from the exact same problems that plagued her 3 month campaign and more. I don't see her making it past a primary. These same hypotheticals in 2013 said that Mitt Romney would be the Republican nominee in 2016. I don't think she runs, but if she does run, I'm debating whether to put her as C or D tier. But I do feel like she starts to lose states like New Jersey, Minnesota, New Hampshire, so I would put her as a D tier candidate. Though I will reorganize the candidates. I think she's definitely better than some of the other candidates on this tier. Then you can see I paused there for a second because I didn't know who this was, but this is actually Ro Khanna. He's somewhat well known, but for the most part, he is a bit of a backbencher. You know, he's made himself famous through I honestly don't know what, but he is seen as a bit of a progressive warrior. Um, I made a joke about him once, reaching out to TPC. One of his staffers contacted TPC, and TPC wants to scam that staffer and do business, his words, not mine, with him, even though TPC is a 14-year-old. But other than that, I don't know too much about Ro Khanna, but once again, I assume that we'll give him the benefit of the doubt, but running as a progressive probably isn't that good of an idea. I will say that he's probably more palatable to the average person um, than some of the other progressives on this list, but I don't think putting him above C tier is really fair. And then we have Amy Klobuchar. I mean, she definitely would be a good candidate. She appeals pretty well to the Minnesota rural areas and suburban areas. She didn't actually do that well in 2024, underperformed a little bit, but still, I would say if she were the nominee, she would be a slight favorite just because she would be able to at least hold her own in some of these rural areas in places like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and do a little bit better in the suburbs, which would help her in those three aforementioned states and a bit of the Sun Belt. So I think I'll put her as A because I don't really see her winning Nevada or Arizona, but she definitely would give Vance a run for his money. I think she'd be able to win Georgia, maybe depending on how much she improves in the suburbs, and probably ends up winning Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. So she is a pretty good candidate. Mark Kelly isn't he's not that great. Um, he won by a lot in 2022, but I'm inclined to believe that's a bit circumstantial. Um, he outran Kitty Hobbs by 4%, which I mean that's kind of impressive, but like I'm pretty sure if you were on the same ballot as Carrie Lake this time, he might have actually underran her because outperforming the top ticket by 5% wouldn't have even won in the state of Arizona this cycle. I'm inclined to believe that part of the reason he won by so much in 2022 was because Blake Masters wasn't the best candidate, was severely underfunded, and Arizona didn't really experience the best Republican year. Had that race instead been a Class 1 Senate election instead of Class 3, which would have made it during 2024, I definitely would have expected him to lose re election, especially if Republicans put up a competent nominee. Like, I mean, really anyone but Carrie Lake could have won that Senate seat in Arizona. Like even Mark Lamb, who supposedly is more extreme than her, would have won that Senate election easily. But I still think he'd be a pretty good candidate. I really can't rank him higher than B tier because 2020 and 2022, his wins do seem circumstantial going against not great candidates, especially 2020. She went against a pretty terrible candidate and he was also considered the heavy favorite for both races, so you really can't say he outperformed expectations that much. But he would still be a formidable foe to put up against Vance. Now we also have Colorado's Michael Bennett. He's not really he's not the greatest candidate. He did pretty well in 2022 though. That was once again because he went up against a pretty terrible candidate. 2016 was a bit of an overperformer. I will say he probably wouldn't do that bad. Um, I could see him potentially winning a swing state or two, so I'd put him in B tier. And then Newsom, I mean Newsom is better than AOC. Um, I wouldn't see him losing every single competitive state and like ending up where Republicans get 361 electoral votes. So I would put him in D tier for that. Like I said, he's not as bad as AOC, but he still is a pretty terrible candidate and is very close to the bottom of D tier. The way he's handled California really hasn't earned him some positive press, and the way that the wildfires have gone probably dooms his chances of winning any national campaign. So I feel like this one's pretty obvious, but Gavin Newsom definitely wouldn't do that well, though he has tried to do some outreach to moderates and Republicans. On his podcast, which why did he do that? But potentially that could pay off if he's able to sweep a lot of his policies in California under the rug. But I don't think he would be able to, so I think he still would lose and lose quite easily. Now, John Ossoff, he's not a good fit for Georgia, but nationally, I could see him, bringing some youthful energy like Obama. He wouldn't do that bad. I still think he would lose, and I really can't put him above C tier. I don't think he'd lose to the point where like New Jersey and Minnesota and New Hampshire and Nebraska second and Virginia are flipping. But I still do think he's definitely not the best candidate, and he won in 2021 because of circumstance. He even lost a special election in 2017 for, if I'm not mistaken, a Hillary Clinton district when he was considered the favorite for a lot of that race. So not exactly the best performance. Now, here we have Phil Murphy. Phil Murphy is a terrible candidate. He would be in D tier just because he nearly lost New Jersey if the 2021 New Jersey gubernatorial election were on the same ballot as the presidential election in 2024, I could see him losing. Like he was that unpopular. Yes, he was running against a good Republican nominee in Jack Citarelli, but he was just hated in New Jersey, and he kind of, to some extent, still is. That's part of the reason why Republicans even have a chance in 2025, just because he's that bad of a candidate. Think Connecticut gubernatorial 2018. So I could potentially see him, getting blown out. I still think he would, at least do well enough to win states like New Mexico and Virginia, but he definitely would not be a good nominee. So next on the list we have Jared Polis. Jared Polis does have a lot of moderate appeal. He won by a lot in 2022, and he didn't have that great of a candidate running against him, but I still think the candidate running against him was as bad as Joe Dea, and still he won by more. He actually won Lauren Boebert's congressional district, which the thought of Polis Boebert voters just boggles my mind. But he's definitely a formidable foe. I can't put him in A tier, but I would say that he's probably in B tier. He definitely could give Vance a run for his money, but I don't think he's nominated, and he's probably just barely not enough to beat Vance in a general election. Next, we have JB Pritzker. Pritzker, he's definitely not that popular. He would start to lose swing states like New Jersey and Minnesota and New Hampshire, but I don't know if the fallout would be that bad compared to someone like AOC, who I don't even think she would have a chance at winning New Jersey if she were the presidential nominee. Like, I'm that serious about how bad of a nominee she is. But he's still nothing great, so I say D tier. Roy Cooper, he's not he's not incredible, but he does have like some crossover appeal. You definitely do have to give him credit for his 2020 win. He was running against the lieutenant governor, which, intriguingly enough, that was the reason why Mark Robinson was able to win the open lieutenant governor election because the incumbent retired to run for governor. Then, even though he underperformed expectations, he still did pretty good in that election. He might be running for Senate in 2026. We have to wait and see. I'm inclined to believe he will. Um, and should he seek that Senate seat, it shouldn't be too hard for him to win it. I still don't think he would be that great of a candidate, but I he's definitely between B and A. And since there's so many people in B tier, I think we'll put him in A tier. Now, Josh Shapiro probably is the best candidate on this list, electorally speaking. There is one more that's kind of a joke, but I would definitely say that Josh Shapiro has a lot of appeal to Republicans and independents alike, as well as Democrats. I definitely do think being a Jewish person will hurt him a lot among the Democratic base because, unfortunately, a lot of Democrats are extremely anti Semitic. But I think whatever losses he takes with the Palestine and the resistant crowd, he makes up it with suburbanites and Republicans in suburban and rural areas. I definitely think that he would be a pretty good nominee for Democrats. He's really the only one who can come close to getting S tier, but I just don't see him having enough Sunbelt appeal and enough universal appeal to win by that much. I still think he would win against Vance, which A tier is like 50-50 on whether they would win against Vance. I think Shapiro would definitely be the favorite for that election, um, specifically because I lean towards Nebraska, not going towards winner take all now. So he's definitely something to be scared of for Republicans if he's nominated. Then we have Sean Fain, the leader of the United Auto Workers. Once again, this is like an Eminem, um, Mark Cuban tier candidate. Like, I don't think he runs, but if he did, he would do relatively well with the union base. He would definitely bleed among suburbanites, and the average Democratic voter. He'd resemble more of an Obama coalition. I don't think he'd lose a state like Virginia and New Hampshire, though. So his path would probably be Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. I definitely could see him getting that. I'd say be an A tier candidate, though. Honestly, I think he's just as likely to run as a Republican as to run as a Democrat. That is to say, he won't be running for president. Then we have another F tier candidate, John Stewart. It's actually the reason why I've made this video because our good friend Golden Political Cat, who we are very close to passing in subscribers, made a video where he said that Jon Stewart would be a great candidate. Jon Stewart is a complete betrayal of the Democratic base. Now, you could also say similar things for people like Josh Shapiro and Sean Fain, but the problem with that line of argumentation is that Shapiro and Fain will win new voters. They will bring more voters into the Democratic coalition. Shapiro, he's governed as a Democrat, but a moderate Democrat, and he's widely approved of. And Sean Fain is the leader of the UAW. They're not that popular, but they are somewhat popular. And he could definitely do better with union workers because of that. Jon Stewart will not. Jon Stewart is completely out of touch with the working class. He's a comedian. He's another rich pig, um, who is exactly who the Democratic Party loves, but he's a rich pig who wants to be, your average Joe fighting for the working class. And I don't think that works out for him. I think he bleeds a lot amongst suburbanites, and yet he doesn't really improve in the rural areas. In fact, against someone like Vance, I could actually see him slipping in, you know, Obama Trump territory, which would be the only place where he could supposedly improve. So I think he would be one of the worst nominees Democrats can put up. I think he loses every state on this board that is not red or teal. Yes, that includes Virginia, New Mexico, Maine at large, um, and Minnesota, New Jersey, New Hampshire. I definitely see Vance getting 361 against him, so I'm going to put him in F tier. Tammy Baldwin, she's definitely not that moderate of a candidate, and I don't see her having too much appeal um, in the Big Seven swing states outside of Wisconsin, which I think she would probably narrowly pull off. She barely won in 2024, so that's something to keep in mind. Barely outperformed Trump. I don't think she would win, but I think she would definitely hold enough of the Democratic base together to, you know, not completely embarrass herself. I could see Vance only getting like 316, um, or 326 against her. Tim Walz, also pretty terrible candidate for Democrats. Definitely worse than Baldwin. Um, D tier, you know, associating with Kamala Harris and then immediately doing a 180 and attacking her for your loss isn't the best idea. He's really in a terrible position where he can lean into populism and get screwed over. He can lean into establishmentarianism and lose all of his appeal that makes him unique. It's been a long time since Minnesota's first Tim Walz in a rural Republican district. Such a moderate. He's really governed as a pretty partisan leftist, especially with the state Senate majority and the state House majority, which was broken in 2024, which is definitely not the best look for his administration. That the state house, which was expected by no one to go Republican, ended up going Republican in a direct refutation to his administration as governor of Minnesota. So I definitely think he gets the worst of both worlds in this scenario. Bleeds a lot against Vance, which would be an interesting matchup because VP versus VP, but he wouldn't be a good candidate. Raphael Warnock, I could see doing okay. He wouldn't do great. His win in 2022 was probably circumstance. I think Republicans didn't put up Herschel Walker against him, and put up anyone like all the way from a U.S. House representative to a statewide elected official. Besides for Brad Raffensperger, who would be endorsed against by Trump, but that's a different story. Um, Home Goods would have probably easily won that race. It was really Herschel Walker having the massive scandals behind him that caused Warnock to win and outperform the presidential result of 2020. Georgia definitely isn't the most Republican state, but still, he he's more moderate than Ossoff. He would have much more appeal than Ossoff, but I don't see him having too much more appeal. I still think he would be stuck in that C tier with Ossoff, and eh, he, I, I just can't see him, having too much appeal outside of Georgia, of course, which he would have a chance at winning. But aside for African Americans and like the average, like ultra democratic voter, I just don't see him having much appeal to the median voter. But someone else who, you know, molded from the same type of candidate who would actually have appeal to the median American is Westmore. Westmore would be a pretty great, not you, we'll get to you. But Westmore would be a pretty great candidate for Democrats. Much like Shapiro, except from a much deeper blue state. Um, he also didn't run against a great candidate in 2022, but his approval ratings show that it wasn't just Dan Cox that is the reason he won by so much. He's far from a bipartisan, but he's a likable person. Um, Presents himself not really as a moderate. He's still a progressive, but a palatable progressive. Like all these fantasies about, like, oh yes, the progressive revolution will happen where West Virginia flips blue. Like this idea of like progressives appealing to the working class that voted for Trump and Obama. He is the type of person who would appeal to them. Like obviously he wouldn't win Ohio or something or West Virginia, but like he would do much better in these Obama Trump areas, at least compared to the average Democrat who will be put up in 2028. And I could see him clawing back some support. He'd be an A tier candidate. Uh, with further review, I'm going to put Sean Fain in B tier because I do think there'd be some problems among suburbanites with him. I think Westmore would do about as well with Union voters as Sean Fain, um, but keep a lot of suburbanites in his coalition as well. So he probably inches him out for a better candidate. Now we also got Gresham Whitmer, who governor of Michigan. She's not the most popular. Like she's popular and her approval is net positive, but like these people who act as if she has a plus 30 approval rating, she doesn't. Like she's somewhat popular, but once again, the state house flipping in 2024 wasn't exactly a glowing result for her. Definitely doesn't show that the people are fully on her side, even though they, for the most part, like her. I think she'd do okay in a general election, maybe win Michigan, even though I do think Michigan is trending pretty Republican. I could see her maybe picking off a few other swing states, especially in a good night for Democrats. But other than that, she really wouldn't be anything special. Um, she, she she'd hold together the core parts of the Democratic base, maybe expand a little bit into the working class and suburbanites who voted for Trump in 2024. But other than that, I really don't see her being anything special. Kirsten Gillibrand, a complete backbencher from New York. I mean, she outperformed in 2024, but she's probably not the best to appeal to the median voter. Once again, um, kind of progressive, not completely, but what I think throws her off a lot, um, and this is fairly recent, is that she voted with Chuck Schumer and the 8 other Democrats to advance the CR. I think there'd be quite a bit of protest from the more progressive wing of the Democratic Party that wants to, shut down the country over petty squabbles and like semantics. I think she definitely would bleed with them. And I just she won by a lot in 2024, but like she was running against a no-name candidate. Like he was a former candidate for a congressional district that she was running against, and Trump endorsed him specifically to get him out of the way for that congressional district. So I just I don't see her doing too well. Oh, by the way, that guy she ran against was also propped up by George Santos. So probably not the best look. I don't think she'd do great. I think she'd be C tier because she wouldn't be atrocious, but she wouldn't be anything special. We move on to Tina Smith, who's retiring, which means she's probably not going to be in politics for that much longer. But she would do okay. She wasn't great in her run in 2018 for the special election, though that's understandable. That was with amongst the it was amongst the special election. I can't fucking speak. It was amongst. Why can I not say that word? It was amongst big scandals for Al Franken, the former senator from that seat, and the seat was also pretty heavily targeted by Republicans. I can understand why she underperformed. Um, it makes sense. And in 2020, she did pretty good, even against a pretty good Republican challenger. I wouldn't see her doing that bad, though I just don't see her having too great appeal. I think she'd do okay in the suburbs, and she has the average DFL nominees appeal to the rural areas, so I think she'd be like C tier, middle of the road, about average. Then we have Martin Heinrich. He won by a lot in 2024, even against a pretty good Republican candidate. He seems like he can do a little bit better with Hispanics, though. A national election, of course, is different than an election for a Senate seat that's virtually uncontested. by either major party. Like no one was spending in New Mexico Senate seat this cycle, but I could potentially see him doing okay. I put him as B tier just because I think he'd do okay with Latinos, which could help him in Pennsylvania and maybe even Nevada and Arizona on a good night. He could win these, though obviously he's not an S tier candidate, but he's okay. Now we have Andy Kim, who he's probably also B tier. He's not that great, and his voting record definitely isn't moderate, but I think he'd at least hold the Democratic coalition together enough. He's a progressive, yes, but also he's not like there's two styles of progressivism. Like the AOC progressivism, where like I'm a progressive, guys. Look, I'm so far left, democratic socialist, and like voting like an extremist, but passing as like a moderate, average Democrat. And I think he's the latter, and I think he does that pretty well. So I think he'd have a lot of appeal. To the average Democrat, and he'd do okay among suburbanites and the white working class, though nothing great. Now we have, I think, Jeff Merkley, um, who, if I'm not mistaken, is the senator from Oregon. He's okay. He's not the best candidate. He actually underperformed quite a bit against Joe Ray Perkins, who was like one of the worst Republican nominees for any seat ever. Like Lauren Boebert, except in Oregon, and even more of a conspiracy theorist. So wonderful. But he's okay as a candidate. He has some crossover appeal. He'd probably only be C tier just because he hasn't been tested in a national election. And like the only competitive election he's run in is 2008. And he's running as an incumbent, but it was Oregon, and Obama won the state by 20. So you know, definitely untested. I could see him doing good, but for now I'll be cautious and say he holds together the key Democratic states, but isn't able to flip any states from 2024. And if he does, it'd be like one state. Now we have Adam Schiff. Do I need to explain this? He somehow underperformed Kamala Harris in California. I know Garvey was a good candidate, but like he underperformed her by like 3 to 4. He has no suburban appeal whatsoever. He's like a conspiracy theorist. The only reason he won because yeah, it's California. Uh, I don't know what this guy. He's like an attention whore. Except he's a senator now because he was an attention whore. He would get the Democratic base together, but he would bleed a lot among moderates, suburbanites, and the white working class. He'd win California, guys. Just the plan. All you need to do as a Democrat is win California, even if you underperform by like 5%. So yeah, we have our final candidate, which is Abigail Spanberger. I don't know why she's here. She's going to be governor of Virginia, probably, but like for now, she's not even a House representative. Like she's just the presumptive nominee for governor in Virginia. Why is she on this? Eminem is on this list, so I probably shouldn't ask. But she's okay. She has some crossover appeal, but not too much. And she really only won in 2020 and 2022 because her district was relatively Democrat. 2020 on the top of the ticket, and 2022 is redrawn to be pretty Democrat. So I think she'd do okay. Probably hold together most of the Democratic coalition. Maybe pick off a swing state or two, especially some of the more suburban ones, Georgia, to be specific. But other than that, she wouldn't do great. So this is the Democratic primary candidate tier list. This isn't by likelihood of them winning a primary, because you would see a lot of these top candidates drift down to the bottom, and a lot of these bottom candidates drift up to the top, if that were the case, which is why I think that 2028 would be much worse for Democrats than this list would imply. Like, this list just implies, oh, run Josh Shapiro or Wes Moore, and you win instantly. Like, that's not exactly how it works. When neither of them is particularly likely to win a primary against someone like Newsom or Harris or even Buttigieg or Bashir. So it's just how I'd say the candidates would be as of now. If you have any disagreements, leave them in the comments below. Try to use more logic in your arguments than, oh, he would appeal really great to the working class. And, my fantasy of Democrats winning Mahoning County and Trumbull would come true. again with Jon Stewart because I cannot physically accept that the working class is anti-democrat and that the Republican Party is the party of the working class and the common people and the Democratic Party is the party of the least. But Jon Stewart would be the greatest candidate ever. Anyways, with that note, thank you for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment down below, share with your friends. It helps out the channel a lot. We are very close to 2,000 subscribers. I can pull it up now. We are like 25 subscribers away. It's insane. Um, as of now, when I'm recording this, we are 26 away. So very close. And by the time I release this video, I wouldn't be surprised if that's less, like 23, or maybe even under 20 subscribers away. So subscribe now while you still have the chance to make it before 2,000. Thank you for watching. Godspeed. Touch your